Something amazing is happening across the country. Cold cases are being solved like never before. They're being cracked with advanced DNA technology. And
Kansas City police have solved a 31-year-old murder case. Fawn Cox was just 16 years old. And tonight, we know the person responsible for her rape and murder.
A warning to our viewers. What you are about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The alarm clock started at 9:30 in the morning on July 26, 1989. It rang the way only old mechanical alarms ring, relentless, indifferent, designed for someone who needed to get somewhere. Felissa Cox climbed the stairs, half asleep, irritated. Her sister had work again today, no reason to sleep through it. She pushed open the bedroom door. "Come on, get up!" She crossed the room. She reached down. She shook her sister's shoulder. And then she understood that Fawn was not sleeping. Fawn had been gone for hours. Kansas City, Missouri, July 25th, 1989. The summer Batman was in every movie theater, and every radio was playing Wind Beneath My Wings. 16-year-old Fawn Marie Cox was standing behind a cash register at Worlds of Fun amusement park, counting other people's change and dreaming about her own car. She had just gotten her learner's permit. Every dollar from every shift was going into a jar at home, freedom measured out in quarters and tips, shift by shift, summer long. She had 8 hours left to live. The man who would rape and strangle her that night had eaten dinner at her family's table. He knew which window to climb through. He knew her schedule, her sister's names, the habits of every person in that house. He was family. And for 31 years, through funerals and Christmases and Thanksgivings and 1,000 ordinary days, nobody knew. You're watching Crimewatch Central, where cold cases get the heat they deserve. If you're new, hit like and subscribe before this one gets under your skin. We go deep. Let's go. The house on Van Brunt Boulevard at East 9th Street was a 2-story family home held together by routine and love and not much extra money. John Cox worked long days. Beverly held the household. They had 3 daughters, Fawn the eldest, then Amber, then Felissa. And when the girls needed more room, John and Beverly gave up their dining room and moved their bedroom to the first floor. That's the kind of parents they were. Fawn was 16, and she was the one the younger two looked up to. She worked without complaint. She roller skated with her sisters on weekends. She never missed church on Sundays. Her best friend, Donna McGee, lived directly across the street, close enough that they could wave from their bedroom windows, and in the long Missouri evenings they would sit outside and talk about everything: boys, high school, the future, the ordinary, enormous things that consume a 16-year-old's life. When the police cars arrived the next morning, Donna would see them from that same window. She would be among the first people outside the family to understand that Fawn was not coming back. But on the night of July 25th, 1989, none of that had happened yet. She had just gotten her learner's permit. She talked about it the way teenagers talk about the thing they want most, like it was already half real. The car, the independence, the ability to take herself somewhere without asking anyone. Her sister Amber worshipped her. "I looked up to her so much," Amber would say, years later when she could finally say it without breaking. "I wanted to be just like her. She was my protector. She stood up for me." That night, July 25th, 1989, Fawn worked a full shift at Worlds of Fun. The cash register dinged. Tickets changed hands. Her feet ached. She had another shift the next day, and she was already thinking about her bed. At 11 o'clock that night, Beverly and Felissa pulled up to collect her. Fawn slid into the back seat. She barely spoke on the drive home. She went straight upstairs. She didn't even eat. She had no reason to be afraid. To understand what happened in the hours that followed, you need to understand one thing about the Cox family home. Not the neighborhood, not the gang activity 2 blocks over, not the broken door lock on Fawn's bedroom, though all of that matters. The one thing you need to understand is the window. Years earlier, the family had accidentally locked themselves out. Amber, tomboyish, fearless, 11 years old, had scaled the side of the house and climbed through the second-floor window to let everyone back in. The family had laughed about it. After that, it became informal house policy. Keep the upstairs windows unlocked in summer. Ventilation, emergency access, the cool night air that made the heat up there bearable. It was practical. It was innocent. Out in the alley below those windows, John's orange dumpster truck sat parked where it always sat, so long that it had become invisible, just part of the landscape, part of the alley, part of the summer. Nobody thought twice about it. That truck was about to become a ladder. The house that night was sweltering. The Cox family's one air conditioning unit, a loud, ancient machine, was crammed into their parents' bedroom window downstairs. It rumbled and wheezed without stopping, drowning everything: the neighborhood, the alley, the night. Felisa took the couch in her parents' room to sleep near the cool air. John was already snoring, a notoriously deep sleeper. Beverly drifted off beside him. Amber was across the street, babysitting. The bedroom she normally shared with Fawn sat empty. Fawn was alone, upstairs. Her bedroom door lock had been broken for months. She had a solution. She wedged a steak knife into the door frame before bed, blade catching the wood, holding the door shut, a teenager's improvised lock. She set her alarm. She climbed in. She closed her eyes. Between midnight and 2 o'clock in the morning, the family's pregnant poodle began to whimper, then bark, not casual, not restless, but urgent, frantic, cutting through even the roar of the air conditioner downstairs. Felisa stirred. She got up, went to the dog, spoke softly until it settled. She assumed it was the pregnancy. She went back to bed. That dog was the only one in that house who knew. The air hummed. The family slept, and somewhere in that house, perhaps already inside, perhaps still climbing, someone who knew every room, every habit, every unlocked window was moving through the dark. 9:30 in the morning on July 26, 1989. The alarm that wouldn't stop. John Cox had gone upstairs first, needing the bathroom. He passed Fawn's room. He heard the alarm. He glanced in, saw his daughter lying still, and did what a father does automatically, pulled a blanket over her, to cover her, preserved her modesty. He thought she was sleeping deeply. He carried on to the bathroom. Downstairs, Beverly had been awake for a while, uneasy in a way she couldn't name. That alarm had been going too long. Fawn was not a heavy sleeper. She called up to Felisa, "Go check on your sister." Felisa climbed the stairs. She pushed open the door. She crossed the room. She reached down. I went over to shake her. "Come on, get up." But she had been gone for a while. Beverly Cox ran up those stairs faster than she'd ever moved in her life. When she saw Fawn lying there, skin an unnatural blue, a gown knotted tight around her neck, completely still, her mind refused the information for one desperate second. She dialed 911, hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the phone. The ambulance arrived fast. It was already hours too late. The paramedics stepped back. This was not a medical call. This was a crime scene. When Amber came home from babysitting across the street, she found police cars lining the block, yellow tape across the front door, investigators moving through the house she had grown up in. She stood on the street outside and tried to understand what she was looking at. She was supposed to have been sleeping in that room. The detectives who entered Fawn's bedroom found a story told in evidence, but it was a story with missing pages. Fawn was strangled. The medical examiner confirmed it. She had also been sexually assaulted. This was not a random intrusion gone wrong. This was deliberate, targeted, and planned. The crime scene offered clues and contradictions. Blankets had been yanked from the closet and left in a heap on the floor. Down in the yard below the sister's window, a stereo and a Nintendo console sat in the grass, thrown out, then abandoned. Entry point: John's orange dumpster truck, the canopy of the adjacent outbuilding, the unlocked window. Physical evidence collected by crime scene technicians included short hairs that didn't belong to Fawn, traces of blood, and semen recovered from her bedsheets. In 1989, that DNA evidence could not be used beyond basic blood typing. No databases existed, no profiles could be built. They also found an army cap in Fawn's room. None of her family recognized it. No one ever determined whose it was. It remains, to this day, the one piece of evidence the case never explained. And the steak knife, the one Fawn had used to barricade her broken door, was found at the scene. One detail troubled investigators most. Fawn's bed was on wheels. A violent struggle would have sent it rolling across the room, unless someone had held it steady. Did that mean two people? One assaulting Fawn, one keeping the bed in place? But only one person's DNA was recovered. That question would remain open for decades. Sergeant Ben Caldwell of the KCPD Cold Case Unit put it plainly: to pick that home and that window to come in undetected and leave undetected makes sense, since the suspect knew Fawn. He was already pointing at the truth. Nobody understood it yet. This case took 31 years to crack. This channel takes weeks for story, real records, real families. If Fawn's story is getting to you, hit like and subscribe. That's how Crimewatch Central keeps going and keeps cases like this from staying cold. There's still a name that needs to be said. Stay with us. The neighborhood surrounding the Cox home operated under the shadow of the 9th Street Dogs, a local gang known for burglaries, thefts, and violence. Everyone on those streets knew them. Most people feared them. And Fawn had been dating someone with connections to the gang. After her murder, that boyfriend was so undone that he enlisted in the military and left Kansas City entirely, as if he needed an ocean between himself and what had happened on that street. In August 1989, 1 month after the murder, a witness came forward with information the police had deliberately kept from the public, details that only someone present could know. 3 teenagers were brought in. One was in Fawn's class at Northeast High School. The other 2 were known associates. A grand jury charged one of them with first-degree murder. He went to jail. For the first time since Fawn's death, her family felt the ground beneath them. He spent 8 months in jail while prosecutors built their case. The evidence seemed to be pointing somewhere real. Then everything came apart. The DNA from the crime scene did not match. The fingerprints on the steak knife did not match. And the witness, the one person holding the case together, suddenly recanted, admitted to lying, stopped cooperating entirely. Without that testimony, without DNA linking any of the 3 to the assault and murder, the prosecution had nothing left. All charges were dropped. They walked out. But before they did, one of the teenagers had confessed. During interrogation, he admitted to breaking into the Cox house that night. He described climbing the orange truck, crossing the canopy, slipping through the unlocked window. He gave details the police had never released, including how, when he threw a tape recorder out the window, the handle snapped off. He told investigators exactly where he had hidden it, under a bush near the house. Police went and looked. It was there, exactly where he said. This was not a guess. This was someone who had been inside that house on the night Fawn Marie Cox was murdered. But he insisted they had only come to steal. They took the Nintendo, the stereo, some radios, tossed them out the window to collect on the way back down. They never entered Fawn's room. They never saw her. They left. Then he withdrew every word. The confession evaporated. Without his cooperation, without DNA linking them to Fawn's murder, the case had no foundation left to stand on. It went cold. If those teenagers broke in through that window on the same night that Fawn was murdered, and one of them all but admitted they did, then there is a question that has never been fully answered. Where was the killer while they were working downstairs? Was he already inside, somewhere in the dark of that upper hallway, waiting? Did he enter separately after they left? Did he climb through that same window and find Fawn alone, by luck, or because he had been watching the house long enough to know exactly what the night would give him? The case was closed. The question was not. Knowing and proving are two completely different things.
Amber Gonzalez ended up in the hospital. I got so overwhelmed, she said. I was obsessed with her case. She was supposed to be in that room. For 3 decades, that fact lived in her body like a splinter she couldn't reach. Throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, John and Beverly Cox held fundraisers, erected billboards across Kansas City, offered reward money, $3,000 in 2000, $10,000 by 2019. Beverly gave interview after interview, her voice steady and broken in the same breath. Money does a lot on the streets. That's what we're hoping and praying for. In 2018, Amber posted detailed, non-public case facts onto a verified cold case forum. She reached out to every person who engaged. She typed her sister's name into search boxes for what felt like the 1,000th time and waited for a stranger to know something that family never could. Nobody came forward. The science wasn't ready, and Amber knew it. She had been following every development in forensic DNA technology for years. She watched other cold cases from the same era get cracked open by genetic genealogy, the science that had finally caught the Golden State Killer. She understood what the technology could do. What she couldn't understand was why it hadn't been done for Fawn. The answer was money, and the answer was time. In 1989, the semen recovered from Fawn's bedsheet couldn't tell investigators much beyond blood type. In the early 2000s, KCPD crime lab scientists finally built a full DNA profile from those stored samples and uploaded it to CODIS, the National Criminal DNA Database. No match. As recently as 2 years before the breakthrough, detectives re-interviewed the former teenage suspects, now adults, and collected fresh DNA samples from them directly. No match again. The DNA profile of Fawn's killer had existed for years. It just didn't belong to anyone in any criminal system anywhere. Genetic genealogy worked differently. Instead of comparing against convicted criminals, it compared against the millions of ordinary people who had voluntarily uploaded their DNA to ancestry platforms. Scientists then built outward, distant cousins, second relatives, branches of a family tree the killer never knew would betray him, narrowing until a name resolved. Painstaking, expensive, and at the time, beyond what the KCPD could fund alone. The Cox family pushed for years. Amber pushed hardest. The FBI ultimately paid. And in the summer of 2020, Operation Legend, a federal initiative named for 4-year-old Legend Talifer, murdered in Kansas City, brought federal resources and advanced lab access into the department. Captain Ben Caldwell, recently promoted after years supervising the missing persons and cold case section, submitted Fawn's case. It was approved. The 1989 semen sample, stored for 31 years while Amber rebuilt her life around a case she couldn't let go, was sent to Parabon NanoLabs. Weeks passed. Amber waited the way she had always waited, not passively, but like someone braced for impact.
Then, on November 11th, 2020, 31 years and 4 months after Fawn Marie Cox was murdered in her own bed, the Kansas City police called her family with a name. It would be the first murder the KCPD had ever solved using advanced genetic genealogy. The first. After 31 years of every other method failing, the answer had been sitting in a branch of the family tree the whole time. It was not a stranger's name. Donald Lee Cox Jr., Fawn's cousin, 21 years old on the night he murdered her, 5 years older than the girl he had known her entire life. He knew the house because he had been welcomed into it, a guest at that kitchen table more times than anyone could count. He knew which windows stayed unlocked because he had watched that family live the way families live around people they trust, without barriers, without suspicion. He knew Fawn would be alone upstairs that night because he knew Amber was babysitting across the street. He knew Felisa slept downstairs near the air conditioning. He knew John slept through everything. He knew all of it the way you only know things about people who have never once thought to hide themselves from you. He used every piece of that knowledge. He climbed the orange truck, he crossed the canopy, he went through the window that was always open. For 31 years after that night, Donald sat at family dinners. He passed the salt at Christmas. He stood at Fawn's funeral and mourned alongside the people whose daughter he had raped and strangled. He looked John and Beverly in the eye at Thanksgiving. He never said a word. According to Amber, there had always been something dark about Donald. He had sexually abused younger girls in the family, secrets buried in the specific silence that families sometimes mistake for protection. But murder? No one had gone there. No one had let themselves. Captain Caldwell would later confirm one detail that sits with you long after everything else. Both of Fawn's parents were still living when the case was solved in November 2020. When detectives told them the name, they were devastated, but Caldwell said they were also somehow sad and relieved in equal measure, because John and Beverly told him they had sometimes wondered whether the cousin had been responsible. They had wondered, and they had said nothing, because wondering and knowing are not the same thing, and because he was family, and because love sometimes looks like the door you cannot bring yourself to open. Donald Lee Cox Jr. died in 2006, drug overdose. His death was investigated because of suspicious circumstances, though it was ultimately determined not to be the result of foul play. During that investigation, the medical examiner retained a blood sample. Because Donald died as a subject of inquiry, not a criminal suspect, his DNA was never entered into any database. It sat in storage, waiting, without knowing it was waiting. When Parabon NanoLabs built the genetic family tree from the 1989 crime scene evidence, the branches led directly to Donald's family. Detectives requested that stored blood sample. They ran the comparison. Semen recovered from Fawn's bedsheet in 1989 against blood drawn during a 2006 autopsy. 100% match. He had been dead for 14 years. Science caught up anyway. For the Cox family, the name brought relief and devastation in the same breath. Relief because the waiting was over. Devastation because of who the answer was.
Fawn's sister told KCTV.
It's a relief. There's closure. The answers aren't always what we were asking for, but there's closure.
There are questions that will be never fully answered. Those 3 teenagers, did they move through that house on the same night while Donald waited in the dark upstairs? Did they know what was happening above them while they packed electronics into their arms? Police closed the case without additional charges. Only Donald's DNA was found on Fawn. Whatever else those boys knew or didn't know, that night belongs to him. And the rolling bed, the detail that had troubled investigators for decades, the question of whether someone had held it steady while Fawn fought, that question closed with Donald too. He was 21 years old and he knew that house. He had time and privacy and no one was coming. Donald lived 17 years after murdering Fawn. He was arrested repeatedly for theft, for drugs. He caused harm in every direction he turned. Then in 2006, his addiction caught him. He died of an overdose before a single person outside that house knew what he had done.
Fawn Marie Cox was 16 years old. She had just gotten her learner's permit. She was saving up, shift by shift, for a car she would never drive. She roller skated with her sisters. She never missed church. She was Amber's protector. She stood up for her. She should be 51 years old today. She should have driven that car off the lot, loud and proud, with her sisters in the back seat. She should have graduated, built something, grown old alongside the people who loved her. Instead, she is frozen at 16, murdered in her own bed, in her own home, by someone she had never once had reason to fear. Her family spent 31 years refusing to let that be the end of her story. Billboards, fundraisers, interviews, forum posts at midnight. Amber in a hospital bed, so consumed by the case she couldn't function. Beverly on camera, voice steady and broken at the same time. John and Beverly, aging, still waiting, still there when the answer finally came. Captain Caldwell said it best. This one touched a lot of people because she was an innocent child who was murdered in her own bed. It rattled detectives and officers who worked it for decades. The window on the second floor of that house on Van Brunt Boulevard was open because a family trusted their summer nights, their neighborhood, each other. It was open because Amber had climbed through it as a kid and everyone had laughed. It was open because John's truck was parked underneath and nobody thought twice. The window that was always open was the window he used. That is not a lesson. It is not a metaphor. It is just what happened, and it cannot be unlocked from the other side. She was my protector. She stood up for me. Amber Gonzalez, Fawn's sister. Rest in peace, Fawn Marie Cox. Your family never stopped fighting, and the truth, even after 31 years, found its way home. If Fawn's story is going to stay with you, and it should, hit like and subscribe to Crimewatch Central. Drop a comment and tell us which moment landed hardest. Every comment keeps this going. We'll see you in the next case.